right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Dodge Mattingly. Tucker waits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here. And the legend
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Table Setters covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined once again my tag team partner, Devin. What's going on, man?
Oh, not too much. Just ready to talk some baseball. What's up, everybody that is listening? Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you. Steve, I'm gonna start the show here with a question, non-baseball related. Out of all the things, what do you think your least favorite? There might be more than one, but what's your least favorite chore to do at home? Like things you just have to do to keep your house running.
I have to say probably it's either taking the garbage out of the dishwasher sucks, especially when you're loading in and it's like all disgusting. Got to remove stuff and put it back in when it's all dirty plates. Probably those two things.
Okay. All right. So I did both of those things tonight, but not the dishwasher thing, but just washing dishes. And I got to say, there's very few things where when I have to do them, like literally the entire time, I'm thinking in my head how much I hate it. And doing the dishes is one. Like they sell you this dream of the dishwasher, right? Like I lived in an apartment in Queens, 2 different apartments in Queens for like 7 years or so before buying a house, right, in the suburbs. And those 7 years, those apartments, no dishwashers. So you're dishwashing by hand. It's terrible. And you're like, oh, I can't wait to get a dishwasher. Like when we get, one of these things, when we get a house, we're gonna have a dishwasher. Like that's such an amazing thing to add. And then like you're still washing dishes. You're still washing dishes. Like, yeah, you can put more stuff in the dishwasher and you don't have to wash those, but you're still washing dishes. And guess what? The dishes that don't go in the dishwasher are the most annoying dishes to wash. So anyway, I obviously I did that right before the show. And I just hate it. I hated every second of it, and I always do.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, you run the risk of becoming soaking wet if you yourself become the dish towel if you do it wrong, where all of a sudden you look and your sleeve is all covered in water. It takes a certain strategy, but you're right. The elusive dish that needs to be cleaned before the dishwasher, it begs the question, what's the point of that dish? But those dishes exist. They're out there. They're designer dishes.
It's just like, come on now. Anyway, we're going to get to baseball here, guys. We have a lot to talk about tonight. There has been a little bit of action in the offseason. It's not quite like a daily, like, all right, we got a story every single day. Mostly rumors, some of them crazy and ridiculous, and you can just laugh at pretty quickly. Others maybe carry some weight, but Steve and I thought we'd start the show by very quickly kind of revisiting our free agent prediction draft that we did probably about 4 weeks ago at this point. One of our first episodes when the offseason began. So we did 15 rounds. Now, a couple of them have been proven wrong. One of them's been proven right. And we have a lot still TBD, to be determined. We're going to go through them and just very quickly state like whether we're still confident in the picks that we have not seen go to fruition yet. And then obviously we'll talk about the ones that we got wrong as well. So round one here, Steve, you started with Kyle Tucker to the Yankees. I started with Edwin Díaz to the Mets. Obviously, neither one has been solved. The Díaz conversation, I think we can actually save for a little later in the show. So I won't comment on that one yet. The Tucker to the Yankees, in a quick sentence, how do you feel?
Not feeling great about it, especially with the comments this offseason to start it off. I feel like Tucker, I felt like the perfect fit for the Yankees, but being that Cashman kind of put those misnomers out there of what they will be doing, what they won't be doing, feels like it's less likely. If I had to take a stab at it today doing the draft over, I probably wouldn't put Tucker to the Yankees.
Interesting. Okay. And you were confident in putting that in your first pick there,
I was very confident. Cashman with the sleeping bag on, sleeping outside, doing the charity sleepover. He gave me all the bad vibes about what the Yankees are doing. It feels like it's a bargain bin type of thing this offseason.
Okay, that's fair. And you know what? I think I was thinking of this. If another week goes by, and we're coming back on here next week, just the two of us to do an episode, and it's still been like not that much action going on, I think maybe we should do an extra 5 rounds on top of the 15 we did earlier to add to it, because there's still so many guys out there, and there's a lot of guys we didn't include in this. We just, we didn't want it to take too long, so we did 15 rounds. But maybe we can add a little bit next week, unless it starts going crazy this week and guys start flying off the shelves.
Yeah, we can also add the points if we get the trades right. Because we're to preview later in the episode. You and I have our predicted trades that will be going down potentially at the winter meetings. That is going to be, I mean, I think we're going to have a lot of stories next week going out of the week if we wait until after the winter meetings to record. But, trading is maybe getting some extra points. Those are harder to predict than the free agents, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. There's just so many moving pieces. Okay. And the free agents are pretty damn hard to pick as well. I said to Steve off air before we came on, like, I would literally, out of 15 rounds, I'd be ecstatic if I get 3 right. And casual listener, casual fan might be like, 3 out of 15? Like, what kind of expert are you? Dude, this is hard. This is really, really difficult. If I get any right, I'll be relatively happy. If I get 3 or more, I'd be ecstatic. All right, so round 2, you started with Pete Alonso, the Giants. I went Cody Bellinger to the Dodgers. I'm still fairly confident in the Cody one. Not that I'm sitting here like, oh, absolutely. I haven't heard a lot of smoke about that recently as far as him going back to the Dodgers, but I hear Cody Bellinger come up in conversation a lot, but not necessarily like, oh, these are the 2 or 3 teams he's going to go to. So I feel like it's wide open for him. But Pete Alonso to the Giants, how are you feeling about that one as we sit here today?
Still pretty good. He's not going back to Queens, in my opinion. So I think anywhere else, I think Boston's probably the sleeper pick for Alonso, but I'm still pretty confident that my pick for him going to the Bay Area will be lived out.
And it's interesting because the Giants, reports about them have been all over the place. Their fans on Twitter are just going crazy because, like, 3 days ago, there was this connection between Tatsuya Imai and the Giants. Like, it makes sense. He against the Dodgers, like, they could use another pitcher there. And then, like, the day after, they're like, no, his price tag is too heavy for the Giants. They're not going to pursue that kind of guy. They're going to go for kind of cheaper options, maybe a Zach Gallen, something like that, Michael King. And then the next day after that, it's like the Giants are in the mix for Kyle Schwarber. So I'm sitting there like, which one is it? Like, are they not in for the big time contracts, or they are? So the Pete Alonso one would fit in there. The interesting thing is, and I challenged you on this when you made this pick, was like, what about Bryce Eldridge there? Like, and you have Rafi Devers for DH. So like, where are you going? I saw a report today, and I take this with a very, very small grain of salt. But there was a report about like Mitch Keller potentially in a deal to the Giants for Bryce Eldridge.
Wow.
To me, that's like way too expensive in my mind for the Giants.
Those are deadline prices.
Yeah. And this is not like a reputable, right? It's not a Bob Nightingale, a John Heyman, any of those guys, John Morosi. It's none of them. It's just an account, and probably nothing to it. But that made me think of this Pete Alonso, because if they're signing Pete Alonso, they're trading Eldridge for pitching. Like, there is sense there. Sure. Like, hey, we can use this guy as currency to get a pitcher, and then go sign Alonso with our money if we like the price, and if maybe his salary or his years have come down. And I have heard that, again, Alonso is not quite finding the market he wants or expects, which is surprising because he had a great season. But all right, we're gonna move on. So 3rd round, you had Alex Bregman to the Tigers, and I had Framber Valdez to the Giants. I will say, when I made that pick, I was very confident. I thought it fit really, really well. I still think there's a possibility, although when I hear that report about them not wanting to pay too much for starting pitching right now, it definitely takes a little bit of my confidence down.
Yeah, the Framber thing definitely got a little bit muddied with the Dylan Cease contract. He's going to be looking for similar money, but he's older, so I'm sure he's probably looking for the years. It's a tough sell, but you and I have the Giants doing 2 separate things. I have them potentially trading for pitching. You have them trying to secure the frontline starting pitcher through the free agency class. It's going to be challenging, but it's also kind of indicative of where the Giants are at. They can either zig or zag. And we got Bird Talks Ball in the chat as well. Nick is in here. He also said is Mitch Keller really worth all that? Like I said, deadline prices, I felt like that would be the asking price, but in the offseason where everything's kind of up in the air, Mitch Keller to me doesn't strike me as that guy unless someone's seeing the underlying stats, which Baseball Savant, looking at his page, doesn't really feel like he'd be worth a Bryce Eldridge type of player.
No, I mean, Keller is a serviceable starter at this point, and at times can look really, really good. But like, you don't even know what you have in Eldridge yet. Like, he played a handful of games at the end of the season. By all means, like, he could be a great power hitter for years to come. So that would be there would have to be more to that package for them to just ship Eldridge off so early. How do you feel about your Bregman to the Tigers pick at this point?
Pretty good. That's still my prediction about where he goes. I think that those two are just kind of circling each other. I can see that probably going down next week in Orlando. I think probably one of the first dominoes to fall.
Yeah, that one's just been. I said this last episode. Like, there's just the Bregman. Like it's been quiet on Bregman, and it's kind of surprising. But it's been more pitching focused so far. Not a ton of position guys signing or anything like that yet. Fourth round, you had Bo Bichette to the Cubs. Okay, I thought that was an interesting one. And then partly, I remember that conversation about like, all right, where does he play though? You got Nico Horner, one of the best second basemen in the game. I personally would like to see Bo sign somewhere where he can play second. I don't know if he's open to it or not. And then you got Dansby, who you signed to a big contract years ago at short. And then I had Kyle Schwarber re-signing with the Phillies in round 4. My confidence is actually going down on the Schwarber pick. I'm not changing it. I can't change it. That's not part of this, but you've heard a little bit Schwarber maybe to the Mets, which would be wild. You heard the Cincinnati thing come up again today, which is the one I love and I really hope comes to fruition. And I'm not a Reds fan. I just think it's exactly what they need. It's a hometown thing. I think it would be fun. And yeah, I am a Mets fan. So if I can get Kyle Schwarber out of my division, I'm going to be pretty happy with that. Sorry, but that's just reality. And then like I said a minute ago, the Giants apparently in the mix too. So a lot of teams in the mix for Schwarber's services. If you put a gun to my head, I'm still going to say Phillies if I have to pick a team. But I will say the waters have been muddied a little bit there. So my confidence is slightly decreased. What about Bichette to the Cubs for you?
Still pretty confident, but if we're drafting today, I think I have a reunion back with the Blue Jays in the books because of just how this offseason's going, where they got the big fish as far as pitching goes. Feels like a reunion would be this good vibes. Keep the good vibes going in Toronto. That feels like a Bichette reunion. And it makes sense, obviously. Bring the guys back, run it back one more time. The Schwarber thing is so fascinating to me, too, because I saw the Mets report you were referencing. The kicking the tires of all these franchises around the player makes sense. He obviously is a little bit one-dimensional. The contract may not age as well, but man, that bat is explosive. And to picture him in certain lineup, picture him in certain ballparks, Great American Ballpark, or potentially in the lineup with Soto and Lindor. It's an interesting concept that I can't picture him out of a Phillies uniform, though. I understand he played in Chicago, played in Boston. He's been elsewhere, but to me, he feels like a Philadelphia Philly.
Yeah, even as a Mets fan, I actually have trouble picturing him in the Mets uni. He just seems like he needs some red in the uniform, no matter where he goes. Phillies, Cubs have a little bit of red. Red Sox, I think, stopped in the Washington at some point too. Like, he just needs like the red and white mixed in somewhere. It'll be interesting because for me to the Mets, like, it seems like a pivot from Alonso to him. If Alonso won't budge on the years and you can get Schwarber for a little bit less years, even if it's a higher AAV, maybe they like that. But I don't know. I kind of think Schwarber might end up signing first, so then he won't be able to be a pivot from missing out on Alonso. It's tricky, that whole thing. It'd be very interesting to see.
Let me answer the Alonso thing. I don't want to backtrack too far, but don't you think there's a certain price tag that comes with being the franchise leader in home runs of this franchise guy? You don't buy into that. You don't get
anymore.
You don't get sentimental.
Dude, David, I have a strong feeling.
I'm talking you, Devin.
Me. Okay.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Yes, this conversation actually came up, I think, on SNY's baseball night. I forget what Baseball Tonight or something. Not Baseball Tonight. Baseball in New York, I think it is. They have on like 6:30 on SNY on weekdays. They had this conversation. Like, do you pay more for that kind of paying for what you know? I think it helps the clubhouse a little bit to have familiarity in there and knowing what you're getting and the guy being comfortable. So yeah, I'd be willing to pay a little bit more for certain guys like Pete. But what I was going to say is I think David Stearns, I think he's starting to throw sentimentality out of the window, and he is trying to build this team in his view for the first time. Like, he's kind of put up with the other stuff and he's given it a chance, and missing the playoffs gave him every reason he needed to not blow it up, but like, all right, I'm just going to start doing what I want here. And I'm really not going to get attached to anything. I'm going to build it the way I want to build it and pay what I want to pay and get to the years I want to get to and not go further. So it's been interesting so far. That's not to say that I don't think Pete has any chance of being back with the Mets. I think there is a chance. But I don't think David Stearns is going to do it on Pete's terms. I think he would do it on his own.
Well, the further we move away from it, the more bad feelings that are starting to be churned up in Pete Alonso's camp, in my opinion, that you guys don't value me that way. Because in his mind, he works hard. He is the guy. He's been the focal point. He's been the marching order citizen in that clubhouse, been a leader in a lot of ways. We got Bird Dog's Paul back in the chat. Nick, he said, I think more teams than ever are bluffing because of how much money has been a focal point for baseball this year. Doubt Reds will be willing to pay Kyle. That's a good point. He compared it to the Pirates and Naylor offer. That there is an optic thing, but I think if you make an offer that is extended to these years, and yes, it may not be, maybe it's a little bit less than market value. You don't expect him to take it. I think that's still a better starting point than we are. Because there were times where the Reds and the Pirates were sitting on the bench watching everybody else dance.
Yeah, I mean, the Reds got the little taste of the playoffs this year. If you look at like Fangraphs as a team, I think they're either second or third in F WAR for their pitching staff, everything including all pitching. So like they have a pitching staff to speak of and be excited about, and one that you feel like you can ride to the postseason as long as you have enough offense. And that's where they've had an issue. I've said this many times. As much as I love Ellie De La Cruz, I think he's more of the Robin to someone's Batman. And maybe that's kind of diminishing more than he needs to be diminished, but I just think that pop is exactly what they need. So maybe this is the guy they pull the trigger on, hometown guy.
I do.
I love it. I really just hope they kind of, sack up and go get the guy that you should get. It's just such an obvious signing to me, but I agree with Nick. I also would not hold my breath to thinking that they're going to go do it until they actually do. Okay, so round 5 here, you had Gleyber Torres to the Blue Jays. That has been one of the picks that have been proven wrong, re-signed with the Tigers. I had Zach Gallen to the Cubs. I just posted a long thread, actually, about Zach Gallen, and kind of as I researched for the thread, I kind of liked him as a free agent more and more and more. I've seen projections, a bunch of different ones, but the one I've seen that to me made the most sense when I actually read the reason for it was about 4 years, somewhere between $70 and $80 million. Could I see him getting more than that? Yeah, because starting pitching is expensive right now. It's expensive at the deadline when it was a trade kind of thing, and now I think money-wise, years-wise, it's still expensive. I think he is a prime bounce-back candidate. If you look at the thread that I put up there on our Twitter account, it's amazing how many of his analytics, behind-the-scenes kind of stuff are just exactly what they always are. The one glaring difference is his knuckle curve, which is one of the pitches he relies on, supposed to be maybe his best pitch, if not second best, got absolutely crushed. But it had just as high of a whiff percentage as it usually does. The difference, I think, is he's just not he wasn't commanding it the first half of the season the way he usually was, and he was hanging things over the plate, and it was just getting crushed. Down the stretch from August to the end of the season, August 1st to the end of the season, he led the league in quality starts, tied with a bunch of other guys like Garrett Crochet and some good names on there that you like to be in the company of. 30 years old, which is same as Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease got this monster deal that Zach Gallen's not going to get because Dylan Cease has the sexier stuff, the higher strikeout numbers, all that stuff. If you go do a career comparison of those two dudes side by side, Zach Gallen is the he's the more accomplished pitcher. All right. And the Blue Jays are gambling on saying Cease is going to continue to get better and we're going to get the absolute best out of him. But Gallen's one of those guys, not sexy, but he gives you 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 starts almost every single year. The only recurring injury he's really had is with his hammy, which, I mean, you don't love that, but at least it's not an arm thing. And I believe in him. He had a 4.83 ERA. Last year. I believe Fangraphs Steamer has the projection for next year in the low 4s. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in the 3s. And if he gives you 30-something starts, if this was his floor this year where he still gave 33 starts, I believe, and I want to say more than half of that, he went at least 6 innings. I want to say at least 15 of them were quality starts. For a bad season, there was actually a lot of good about it, if that makes any sense. So him to the Cubs still makes a lot of sense to me. I've heard his name rumored with the Giants, but I'm still pretty confident in Zach Gallen with the Cubs. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I also think for all the grace that Cease gets with the advanced metrics of saying that the expected ERA versus what the ERA was, you should also take into account the other Zach Gallen type of things that exist out there. That's not just the numbers black and white on the back of a baseball card. As you mentioned, he's making the starts. He's pitched in big games before. He's not going to get Cease money, as you mentioned, but I think he might be a bargain when it comes down to it, where you have a team that's looking for a reliable starter that can go out there. And like you mentioned, there's a lot to like about what he brings to the table. And I wouldn't be scared away. I would be scared away for Cease money with Gallen, but if you're paying
Oh,
less
yeah.
with less years, I mean, to me, I mean, if you're putting Gallen versus Cease next to each other as far as pound for pound value, you can make a case for Gallen over Cease just 1-for-1, in my opinion. And it's because Cease is out there, and I think everybody loves the stuff plus and the underlying metrics, but sometimes those things aren't accurate. It's about what happens on the field, right? So I think there's a lot to be said about it.
Gallen's finished in the top 10 of the Cy Young 3 times. And he finished in the top 3 2 years ago, 2023. Like, he's not that far removed from that. I think last year was very much an outlier that does not tell a story of a guy that's actually diminishing. He just struggled with one of the pitches that needs to be part of his bread and butter. And it took him a long time to find himself again. But again, if you look at some of those starts, I mean, he had some really nice starts mixed in there where he showed himself. I really don't think, again, if you look at some of those numbers, the velocity's not dipping down. The movement on the pitches, the spin rate, like all this stuff for the most part is the same. The hard hit percentage went up, especially first half of the season. Then he got it a little more under control the second half. And the more you look at this stuff, the more it reads as, all right, the knuckle curve, he just couldn't command it last year, and it really hurt him. But all right, so we expected to go faster through this. So how about this? We're going to keep ourselves to 1 sentence or less on each of these picks because we have 10 more rounds left that we want to just quickly take a look at and review. 6th round, a little bit easier because this is another one of your picks that has already been solved. This one was your correct pick, which has given you the 1-0 lead that you still cling to over me. Josh Naylor staying with the Mariners. You were correct there. I had Pete Alonso to Boston. My 1 sentence there would be, yes, I can still picture it. All right. Round 7, you had Framber Valdez to the Orioles. I had Bo Bichette staying with the Blue Jays. Quick comment on that. Blue Jays seem. All right, sorry, go for Framber, and I'll tell you Bichette.
I'm still pretty confident that it could happen. I think that we have to wait and see for the Orioles. They made some. We'll talk about who they signed so far, but they're not done, and I don't think there is a open bag of tricks that we're going to see Mike Elias go to. But I think Framber is the obvious choice to me. But again, we have to have Mike Elias sign on to it. That maybe step out of his prototype of what he likes the team to look like, because that's been a conversation on and on and on we go about it.
Yeah, and Bo Bichette to the Blue Jays. I mean, you said it before. You feel like it's coming. I like that pick of mine. I think I'm going to get a point there. The Blue Jays seem to be out for blood, and I love it. I think Bo's got to be back in the mix. Round 8, you had Ranger Suarez to the Blue Jays. They've already added a lot of pitching. I had JT Realmuto to the Nationals. How do you feel about Suarez to the Blue Jays as your pick?
I'm not saying it's impossible because I mean, their staff would be absolutely loaded. It probably would just be overkill at this point, spend the money elsewhere. So I don't feel as good about it as I did going into it before they signed Cease.
You were on the right track, though, with them adding a reputable pitcher. It's just they went in a different direction or a couple different directions. JT Realmuto to the Nats, I still feel really good about it. Haven't heard much about him, but it makes a lot of sense to put a veteran catcher like that with that young staff that could use a little help. And even around the young position players, I think he'd be a good guy in the clubhouse on a 2 or 3 year deal there. 9th round, you had Cody Bellinger to my New York Mets. I had Kyle Tucker to the Philadelphia Phillies. How do you feel about Bellinger possibly going to Queens?
I still feel really good about it, especially with the Nimmo trade now. I think it opens it up pretty great.
Yeah, and we seem to love taking Yankees after a 1 year stay in the Bronx. We like to bring them over to Queens. It's a trend now. Kyle Tucker to the Phillies. It's weird. There's just not as much chatter about, like, legitimate chatter about where he might be headed. Obviously, there's rumors, but like nothing that's really like, oh, that seems like it's logical. That seems like a report that there's sources to make sure that I just haven't heard much. So I'm going to say my confidence is the same. I could absolutely see the Phillies are going to swing big somewhere here, whether it be bringing back Schwarber or maybe bringing in Tucker. I could see it. So still pretty confident there. All right. So round 10, we had Munetaka Murakami you had going to the Yankees, and I had Dylan Cease going to the Mets. Don't have to talk about that one. It's been proven wrong. How do you feel about Murakami to the Yankees?
Still a possibility. I think internationally, he's one of those players. We go back and listen to the Jim Allen episode. I think he did a really good job talking about what he brings to the table. A lot of holes in his swing, but I think the Yankees need to shore up first base. And you might think Ben Rice is the answer. I think they aren't done, and they're probably going to look at a different way to construct the team.
Got to give Ben Rice the chance.
I love Ben. I'm just saying,
full-time first baseman.
I'm looking at it through Cashman's lens. I don't think they see Ben Rice as the full-time first baseman long-term. I just don't.
Murakami just, to me, just looks like another DH. You can't add another DH here in the Bronx? But I mean, I'm not saying I could see it. I could see Cashman trying to get, that Japanese presence back over here, which they've
Nick's
struck out
on the way to go
years
pick up Kyle
now.
Tucker from the airport.
I know he loves it. All right, round 11. Round 11, I had Michael King. Oh, no, sorry. You had Michael King to the Mets. I had Ranger Suarez to the Orioles. How do you feel about King to the Mets at this point?
I do think it's a possibility. Still probably not as good as I would liked it to be, but I'm probably like 85% as confident as I was.
Okay, fair. Ranger Suarez to the Orioles. It still makes a lot of sense, and I know the Orioles have been relatively active here, a trade, a free agent signing, a couple trades actually, free agent signing. My confidence is a little bit down just because I have more doubt on. There's a part of me that is starting to see maybe the Orioles are going to say they have enough and not go for the starting pitcher where I think they have to. They already traded one away, so my confidence is a little less. 12th round. Your pick has already been disproven. Devin Williams to the Brewers. He ends up going to the Mets across town for a 3-year deal there. We'll talk about it later tonight. I had Robert Suarez to the Rangers. The glaring need in Texas is a closer, and I think not that he's going to be cheap. I just think he'll be cheaper than a few of these other guys on the market. I think it makes so much sense, but the fact that there's all these rumors about them cutting payroll doesn't exactly inspire confidence that they're going to go pay a closer. So I could see them trying to go a different route there. So confidence down, but I still think it makes tons and tons of sense for that team if they actually truly do want to try to compete right now.
I'll save my thoughts on the Devin Williams stuff, but the David Stearns reunion was close enough because he returned. Obviously David Stearns had him in Milwaukee and now obviously reunited in New York.
Yeah, I think he's loved him. And again, we'll talk about that match in a little bit. All right, so you had Shota Imanaga, who at this point when we did this was a free agent. You had him to the Red Sox. I didn't notice this one. This one, he took the qualifying offer, correct?
He did.
So he took the qualifying offer. Maybe I should give you a redo for that one. I don't know if that's a fair one. We'll talk about that off air.
Yeah.
But you had him to the Red Sox. Couldn't happen. He didn't really actually truly make it to the free agent market there.
Well, the Glaber one was a qualifying offer too, thing that I missed out on as well.
That's true. So yeah, I guess it's fair. And the guy actually, this is same for both of us. I forgot. Brandon Woodruff to the Cardinals was my 13th round pick, who also ended up taking the qualifying offer to the Brewers. So no redos. We both kind of got screwed on that one. No biggie. Round 14, you had Willie Castro to the Cardinals, and I had Eugenio Suarez to the Angels. How do you feel about Willie Castro to the Cardinals at this point?
I mean, someone's got to, line up and take some swings in St. Louis, but I think I feel confident. They're rebuilding, but I think Willie Castro is a nice little piece you can add to the fray. Maybe trade him off at the deadline if you need to.
Yeah, kind of like one of those, like, look, we are not giving up kind of signings.
Yeah, like a Tommy Pham piece. You know what I mean? Like a Tommy.
Yeah.
Pham
While they trade everybody else away,
exactly.
You make this sign. I mean, stranger things have happened. Eugenio Suarez to the Angels, still very, very confident. I just feel like that's going to happen. Last round, you had Dylan Cease to the Cubs. Not going to happen here because of his signing with Toronto. I had Lucas Giolito to the Athletics, my wild card pick that Steve told me he would give me double points for. I'm going to stick firm, man. That's wild card, and I like it. So we'll see if it happens. Haven't heard anything about the A's, but all right. So that was our just quick look back. And if you want to hear that episode in full and you did not yet, it was a fun one, and we give a little more reason for each pick instead of just a quick confidence meter there. But we're going to talk now about some of the actual signings and trades and things like that. So let's get into it.
So the Baltimore Orioles, we talked about it, entered this offseason with 3 clear priorities: add an outfielder, secure a back-end reliever, and acquire a top-end starter. So trading Taylor Ward, we talked about this live on air. They moved aggressively to fill the second void, signing Ryan Helsley to a 2-year, $28 million deal with a opt-out after the first season. So we know Ryan Helsley arrives with some all-star credentials. He has elite raw stuff and a chance to stabilize the back end of the bullpen where they're so desperately in need of that. Obviously for Helsley, this comes down to fit, Devin. I think obviously he'd have multiple closer opportunities around the league. He drew some interest from reports from Detroit. They were the most notable team that was in on him. And they were curious about converting him into a starter, which was part of the conversation. But Baltimore's pitch definitely resonated with him. He talked about with the reporters on the video call. He said, "I'm just excited to be a part of it." He also talked about conversations with former Cardinals teammates now in Baltimore: Andrew Kittredge, Tyler O'Neill, Kyle Gibson, Jack Flaherty, and Dylan Carlson, all help reinforce the impression that the Orioles were the right landing spot for him. Mike Elias was also speaking on this video call saying that they needed an experienced ninth inning guy. He said it multiple times, especially obviously with Felix Bautista expected to miss most of next season. That's a whole other story about Felix Bautista, which is just terrible to hear. I mean, one of the more exciting elite arms just kind of gone to the wind, and we'll see if he can get back after next season. But Helsley, I mean, we'll talk about him here. He saved 49 games in 2024, 21 more before being traded to the Mets, and then kind of a nightmare second half that you witnessed firsthand to watch in Queens about how it all fell apart.
Yeah, man, we gave this dude an entrance. We gave this guy an Edwin Díaz-like entrance, and he just went out there every night and got shelled. And you kind of sat there like, when are they going to take this WWE entrance away from this guy? This is embarrassing. Anyway, so I know you and I feel a little differently about this, which is I'm excited about this conversation because I think, not that I'm completely pessimistic here. I will say, and I think this is true for you with Devin Williams too, it's kind of hard to be optimistic about a guy you watched for your team really struggle and not be his best self. And I think we're going to see that in back-to-back conversations here. But that's not my only reason for being skeptical. Let me just start with this. I think it is a reasonable signing by the Orioles, especially with what you said about Bautista. And I agree with Mike Elias, getting a guy that's been there, done that. I'm okay with all of that. Okay. I'm a little, again, pessimistic is too strong of a word, I think. Cautious, I would say, that he's going to go there and be that Ryan Helsley that was dominant for the St. Louis Cardinals. Because to be honest, I don't just think it was a problem when he got to the Mets. I think it was the developing issue. And yes, there was the pitch tipping, and that is what most people are focusing on. But his fastball, the one that he can throw up to 103, has been getting hit more and more for a while now, not just those 2-3 months in Queens. If you look at it, 2022, batters hit 150 against his four-seam fastball. 2023, it went up to 224. 2024, it went up to 276. And last year, it exploded, and the hitters went 422 against his four-seamer. Now, keep in mind, Helsley is, for the most part, a two-pitch pitcher. Four-seamer, slider. He mixes in a couple other things here and there, but for the most part, that's what you're going to see from Ryan Helsley. And when you see a guy throwing sometime, averaging 99 and getting up to 103 sometimes, you expect that pitch to do pretty well. Batters slugged 667 versus his four-seamer last year, just 367 the year before, 328 in 2023. Again, not a good trend here. 6 home runs against that pitch last year, only 2 the year before, 0 in 2023. The home run per fly ball rate, 30% home run per fly ball rate. That is a yikes number. And again, I think people want to blame it just in his time in Queens, but it was popping up on the radar before that. The contact percentage against his fastball in the zone. Right? To me, this is one of the most important numbers when I'm looking at pitchers. And I did a thread on Cole Raggins a couple weeks ago, or maybe even just a week ago. And one of the things I pointed out that I like the most is his Z contact percentage. Okay. It was one of the best for a pitcher, or maybe it was the swing and miss percentage in the zone. I love that number. If you can throw it in the zone and still get a decent number of whiffs, that's a good thing. And Raggins is the best at that when he's actually out there healthy. So the Z contact percentage for Helsley has steadily increased from 2022, 80.9% 2022. Okay, contacting in the zone on the fastball, 83.2% the next year, 86.8% the year after that, 87.2% last year. So a little bit of a troubling trend, especially the fact that he's still throwing pretty much just as hard. His velocity still averaged 99.3 last year, only down slightly from 99.8 in 2024, 99.9 in 2023. I just don't think he can afford to have one of his best pitches when you're basically a two-pitch pitcher performing so poorly and trending the wrong way. Okay, with all that being said, he could come out there and maybe it's just an issue of location, similar to what I was saying about Zach Gallen, obviously a much different pitcher, but maybe it's just it is just the pitch tipping and a little bit of command issue, and he'll get that back and be lights out. But there is a little bit of a reason to be wary here for the Orioles, that they're going to get a guy maybe not as bad as he was in Queens, but also not the dude that you saw in St. Louis for a few years.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're seeing is that 2022, 2024 high mark that everyone thinks they can get him back to. And the pitch tipping is where I was going to go as well. Eno was mentioning this as a big thing. Obviously, it was like the hand position as became set was giving hitters clues on whether it was going to be a fastball or slider. You mentioned being a two-pitch reliever. Taking away one of those pitches is just not a good equation. And then The other piece of this was the pitch sequencing, because the extreme count predictability. And I was looking at some of the metrics here. Hitters could essentially sit on certain pitches depending on the situation. So some of these numbers are alarming. It feels like it's the decision making. So it either could be coming from the Mets side of things, the Mets pitching coach. I'm not sure all of this, but looking at this, he was throwing 75% fastballs in 2-0, 3-0, and 3-1 counts. I mean, that's 3 out of 4 times you're probably going to get a fastball in that spot, which means you can guess that you're going to get something like that in the strike zone. 74% fastballs in full counts, and the slider was used 72 times in 99 opportunities, 73% in 1-1 counts. So that level of predictability, no matter if he has elite stuff, in the big leagues, that's going to get hit. I mean, they addressed this in the conversations after the fact. Drew French is their pitching coach. He talked about this openly, saying they've already begun discussions about refining the fastball shape, recapturing the feel at the top of the zone, and potentially introducing a new wrinkle or two to reduce the predictability, maybe introducing a third pitch as well. Helsley seems excited about open, maybe getting something in. That, to me, to be open-minded going in is what you want from Helsley, because clearly nothing was working pitching to a 7.20 ERA across 20 innings with the Mets. It just was a disaster. But you look at the models, I mentioned the advanced stuff. Stuff plus, it's well above average. The pitching bot loves the stuff. They still see it as a high-end fastball. His velocity kind of averages out at 99.3. You mentioned the cap of it being 103, but he's essentially unchanged from his 2022 All-Star peak. And the other conversation, this might get a little nerdy here, but it's about the release point. In 2022, his arm angle was climbed about a 52 degrees to 62 degrees. So that 10-degree difference, some baseball writers and people looking at the metrics are looking at this saying, that 18 inches of induced vertical break, the pitch plays a little bit less deceptive, and that steeper arm slot becomes kind of problematic for a pitcher like him. And the result is fewer late swings and more hard contact. And then you add in the pitch tipping, extreme count predictability. To me, that is a recipe for disaster. So you mentioned there'd be kind of a mild warning and all this, and that you'd be kind of naive not to believe that there is some conversation that this could not go well. But I think there's no real evidence of a full decline. You can look at this valley that we're in right now with him. If Baltimore believes what they did with Trevor Rogers, that they believe there's a system in place where they can fix pitchers and they can get them to be their absolute best stuff. We know the raw stuff is there, Helsley, and I think he's going to be really good at the back end of the bullpen for them.
Yeah, and I don't want to say I'm rooting for the Orioles, but I would like to see them back in the mix, because I think they're a fun team right now. And it's kind of sad to see a team like that with all that young talent just going the wrong way after 2 playoff appearances, obviously, that were not fruitful for them. You want to see them on the up and up, at least challenging, like being in the mix for most of the season. So hopefully it works out for them. I mean, listen, the O's have made some moves here. All right. And I think necessary moves. They also added Kittredge back to the mix in Baltimore. You got Kyle Bradish returning. We'll see if it's the Kyle Bradish from, a couple of years ago before the injury. And there's some others returning as well. So they're in the mix. I just think there's still need more moves. There's more moves that they need to make to compete in this division. Like, you see what the Blue Jays are doing. You see that the Red Sox are clearly like in the mix for a lot of different things right now. They are ready to go. This is the offseason. It seems like they are putting all their chips on the table. The Yankees, I mean, we're kind of waiting, but I will say it, even though the Yankee fans don't want to hear it, like, they could do almost nothing and still be a really good team. And I believe that. I know that's not what Yankee fans want to see, but I do think it's true that they would still be a 90-plus win team if they literally just went into the season today. I mean, bringing Cody Bellinger would be a nice piece there, but I don't think they have to do a lot. So the point is, like, the O's, okay, we like that you're active. Do something else. Maybe you're active in the winter meetings. This is not going to necessarily satisfy the fans. I think the fans are okay with it. I think a lot of the fans like it, but they absolutely want more, and they should want more.
Yeah, and as far as the money goes, too, if you look at some comparable deals, Rafael Iglesias got $60 million for 1 year. Phil Maton got $14.5 million over 2 years. We saw the price of the late inning arms rise. So this 2-year, $28 million deal is $14 a year. It makes sense. I mean, he is a year removed from being elite, under 3 ERA in his career, 105 saves. You mentioned the triple-digit fastball. They're begging him to get back to where he was. And honestly, it's low risk looking at the amount of cost in there. So I think they're betting he's still a weapon. And like you said, I mean, this can't be the only thing they do. If it is, then they're in bad shape. But they have to go out and get a front-end starter and figure out a way. I mean, if Taylor Ward is the guy that they think he is, okay, he's the outfielder, but they have to get a frontline starter.
Yeah, they absolutely have to. If the offseason ends and they didn't add that guy, it's a disappointment, even if he did a lot of other things. So, not putting a grade on their offseason. There's still a lot left to be said by Baltimore.
All right, well, let's head over to the New York Mets and another situation where it did not go well with a reliever in New York, but the New York Mets made one of the more significant bullpen moves of this offseason so far. They signed former NL Rookie of the Year, two-time All-Star Devin Williams to a 3-year, $51 million contract that includes $6 million in a signing bonus spread over the life of the deal. This was first reported, of course, by Jeff Passan. There's no opt-outs or options, which means the Mets are confident that he's going to be back being that late inning premium arm after that rocky 2025 we saw in the Bronx. The bigger question, and we'll talk about this deal, do we believe he will be the team's closer, or he will be the highest leverage setup man? That will depend on the looming question of, are the Mets re-signing Edwin Díaz? Are they bringing him back? Díaz, as we know, opted out of his deal last month, remains the top free agent reliever available. A lot of conversation around Metland is they must bring him back no matter what the deal looks like as far as years go. I think most conversations, most people close to the Mets say that because they brought Devin Williams in does not remove the possibility of a reunion. In fact, according to Passan, the Mets remain very interested in bringing back Edwin Díaz, but it does give them a high-end insurance policy at the back end of the bullpen. I know Met fans don't want to hear that because they want Díaz back in a Mets uniform, but if Williams is the guy and he is the guy that was the airbender and he, and Yankee fans don't want to hear it, and I understand it was low leverage situations, but Devin Williams kind of righted the ship a little bit by the end of the year. It wasn't like, he had a lot of blow-ups that inflated that ERA, but he figured it out by the end of the year. Like, he wasn't the elite Devin Williams, but he certainly was getting outs, and his stuff looked much better in the late portion of the season. So looking at the rough surface, for the Mets, to me, similar with Helsley, the underlying metrics paint a very different picture for the Devin Williams we saw. 195 expected batting average against, the lead strikeout, as we mentioned before, the whiff and chase rates, and the airbender. This is a true unicorn pitch. If he can be able to get back in the mix with this, get a feel, the confidence is back, feeling like the team is behind him. Because let's not forget, feels like not only the Yankees, everyone on that coaching staff, the Yankee fans, it did not feel like a good fit from the beginning. And I think that plays a part. There's a mental part of the game. And we saw for Devin Williams, again, he went in, had 4 scoreless playoff outings for the Yankees. Everyone wants to talk about all the blown saves and all the big moments. Even as David Bednar was handling the saves, Devin Williams was getting outs in the postseason. Yes, he wasn't the dominant reliever we saw across 6 years in Milwaukee. No, 1.66 ERA, 65 saves in 3 seasons before being traded. But the track record for him kind of lends it similar to copy and paste what I said about Helsley. I feel like the Mets, and they paid for him for sure. We talk about the price of the back end arms. This is a no-brainer for a win now team. Devin Williams is an option that could be elite, and we could be forgetting about what happened in the Bronx.
Some deferred money in there too, which I think is important, because to be honest, if you showed this contract to Mets fans or any baseball fan before last season, they'd be like, holy shit, that's a steal. Okay. And I think there's actually some people that still think this is a steal for the Mets. I like it a lot. I'm not jumping up and down about it. I'm not like, oh my gosh, we're going to the World Series, but I like it. I think it's a nice spot. Now, obviously, all Mets fans will like it even more if it ends up being where you also re-sign Edwin Díaz and Devin Williams gets more of a setup man role. I think that makes it a slam dunk at that point. Although both of those guys get themselves in some trouble with walks a little bit. So like 8th and 9th, you might upset our stomachs a little bit with those guys back to back. But overall, the stuff of those guys back to back would be as elite of a combination as we've seen in a long time. I mean, as elite as Devin Williams with Josh Hader was. Let's just say that. You mentioned the underlying analytics. There are multiple numbers we could point to show you that Devin Williams should be an elite guy out there. Similar to, like, there's been all this talk on social media, and Eno Saris, our guest from a few episodes ago, has been all over social media kind of pounding the drum as far as ERA is not what front offices are using to predict the future of the pitcher. It's more K per walk, K per 9, that kind of that is what they are looking at more so. And I mean, Devin Williams is a great example of this. His K percentage was the highest of any reliever other than Mason Miller last year. So, he's still got great stuff. He was at least a little bit unlucky 4.79 ERA. The expected ERA is 3.11, which still would have been significantly higher than most of his ERAs. But that's a huge difference in expected ERA to regular ERA. So, like, a little bit of bad luck. He was really, really bad with runners on. And his left on base percentage is not nearly as high as you would expect. And most people will tell you that is not going to happen 2 years in a row. Okay. And then there's the other argument is this dude can't pitch in New York. Well, look at his splits and then tell me, was his home ERA better or was his away ERA better? I'll give you the answer. He was better in the Bronx than he was on the road, significantly. So don't give me the he can't pitch in New York kind of stuff. I think it's a good signing. I think the price is right. The deferred money takes the AAV down a little bit. I think it's solid all around. I think it also protects the Mets in case they do lose out on Diaz. Mets fans will be a little disappointed, but at least you can be like, all right, we got a guy that we know has done it. Yeah, he's coming off a bad year, but I feel like the majority of Mets fans believe in this dude. And I think a lot of baseball fans believe in him for good reason. Some of the numbers we just pointed to. With Diaz, I think it seems to be that the kind of disagreement between he and the Mets is the years. The reports that I'm seeing is Diaz really wants 5, and the Mets really don't want to go past 3. To me, push comes to shove. You give 3 years with a 4th-year option somehow. Give some escalators in there to motivate this dude to be here. I think he wants to be here. I just worry, and I've said this a few weeks ago, I worry very, very much that the Los Angeles Dodgers are lurking in the grass here and will blow his doors off and be like, come win a World Series with us. I think he wants to be in Queens. I really do think that's where his heart is. I think the Mets really do want him back. But I don't see David Stearns giving in to the 5-year demands unless there's something in there that kind of makes it more palatable.
We have Armin is amazing in here, and thanks for listening, my friend. He said, Mets fan here. I'll love the Devin signing. If Diaz is back, I'll like it if Fairbanks or Robert Suarez is signed. I'll hate it if Devin is the main piece and Stearns and Cohen sign lower tier pen arms. He gives the clarification about that $15 million deferred. He says goes $5 million in 2026, $5 in 27, and then $5 in 28 per John Heyman. So you're right. I think it's similar to what we're talking about Helsley. The bigger picture of the Mets offseason has to be put in place once it's done. And for Devin Williams, like you said before, the expected FIP, 2.68, 195 expected batting average against. You mentioned all the metrics. Even going back to that Rookie of the Year season, he was 0.33 ERA, pitching in big spots, setting up Josh Hader during multiple award-winning seasons. And he took over closer when Hader was traded. So, like, this guy has pitched in big spots. I understand he got, quote-unquote, broken by Pete Alonso, as a lot of people want to say. But sometimes, these are professional hitters, and sometimes they get the better of these other pitchers. And for me, it never got off on the right foot with Devin Williams in New York. It just something wasn't right. And sometimes the settings don't work. And that will kind of lead us into a story with Sonny Gray later in this. But sometimes it's just not a fit. It has nothing to do with they couldn't handle the pressure in New York. Sometimes it's the coaching staff. Sometimes the pitch selection. Sometimes it's just you're not comfortable being like all these things are the human element of baseball that pitching in New York is different in New York with the Yankees and the Mets. It's just, they're different organizations and some people like playing for either one. And we shall see how it lines out. But I think there are really 2 paths for the Mets. Like you mentioned, Diaz departing, Williams becomes the closer and the Mets use those dollars to pursue potentially a reunion with Pete Alonso, Kyle Schwarber, another frontline bat or another late inning reliever. We talk about Suarez and Fairbanks, or if Diaz resigns, you have one of the more electrifying closers of this generation paired with Devin Williams, and additional leverage arms are expected to be added. I think the better path to me is path 2, but path 1's not so bad either. I think you can be confident that Cohen and Stearns are in here trying to put a contender on the field. I think that they look at the way the last year went was an embarrassment. They're not going to say it openly, but they're very upset how last year went. And they're looking to make their mark on this offseason and then really on the field next year.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I mean, obviously the Diaz thing is huge. The Pete Alonso decision is huge. And I think if that money is not spent on those guys, like you said, it'll be spent elsewhere. I think they're going to be aggressive. But let's not forget the main need here. Even if Diaz is back in the fold, even if Pete Alonso is back in the fold, or maybe one of the 2 is back in the fold, the main target here for the New York Mets has to be starting pitching that can give you innings every 5th day. Okay. If it's one guy, okay, but it probably should be 2. And I know that would make the rotation super deep. But guess who else went into the season last year with a rotation that seemingly spanned 8-9 dudes? The Los Angeles Dodgers. They were signing guys and they having guys come back from injury, and you looked at it, it's like, well, how many guys does this team need? People get hurt, right? And the Dodgers, we've talked about this, had the luxury of when one of their pitchers got hurt, tell them, take your time. All right. One thing that David Stearns has been criticized here, partly by Adam Ottavino, and I guess the criticism went more towards Mendoza, but other people argue that it should fall more on Stearns, is managing pitching injuries and running some of these bullpen guys into the ground. And part of the reason bullpen guys are getting run into the ground is because none of these starting pitchers can go more than 5 innings. And then you look at David Peterson, who was the only guy who could go deep into games and then fell off a freaking cliff the last month or two of the season, maybe more than that. Well, he might have been taking on a little more work, a little more pressure, because he was the only guy that was going in deep. I think he just hit a wall. I don't think David Peterson is just never going to be good again. He was an all-star and a deserving all-star. Ever since the hip surgery, he's been a different dude. And I actually believe very much that he's going to be a good pitcher. Just got to learn how to make it a full season now. He hasn't really had the chance to do that. But with all that being said, whether you trade Kodai Senga or he bring him back, Nolan McLean will be up in the big leagues for sure, and he looks like the real deal. Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat probably start in AAA and have to kind of work their way back up. Christian Scott might be back. So there's a lot to look at. Clay Holmes is still in the mix. Sean Manaea, bordering, they talked about this on Rate and Barrels recently, bordering on should probably be back in the bullpen unless he can kind of develop another pitch. He's kind of like a one-pitch guy at this point sometimes. But so there's a lot to talk about there, but don't be fooled. The target and the way you will grade the Mets offseason once March hits is, did they add to the rotation legitimate, proven guys that can give you innings?
So let's head around with the rest of the headlines here. We have 2 American League clubs turn to Asia's top leagues this week for pitching help, continuing a trend of MLB teams mining the KBO and the NPB for breakout arms who reinvented themselves overseas. So we start with the Chicago White Sox agreeing to a 2-year, $12 million contract with left-hander Anthony Kay, while the Blue Jays struck their 3-year, $30 million agreement with the 2025 KBO MVP Cody Ponce, which is the richest MLB return contract ever for a pitcher coming out of Korea. So let's start with Anthony Kay. You mentioned him on the conversation with Jim Allen. He came up in conversation. I texted you this morning when we're putting together the document here, and I think what you said was yuck for him. He gets paid out of here. We look at the underlying metrics of what he was able to do. Of course, not in a headline name when he was here in MLB, but went over to the MPB and did what he did. This includes $5 million annually, a $2 million buyout, and a $10 million mutual option for 2028, and up to $1.5 million in incentives. Clearly, the White Sox are still very deep in a rebuild. This mirrors the approach that they're going to target former first-round picks, rediscover themselves overseas. Chris Getz used this playbook successfully, most notably with Eric Fetty, who signed for 2 years, $15 million after his breakout KBO season. He was flipped back in 2024 for Miguel Vargas and then 2 top 25 picks. So I think we're looking at the same thing here with Anthony Kay from their end, because you look at the numbers. I'm not sure if they're going to all translate, but you have to be very impressed. I mean, 30 years old, to be 31 in March by the time opening day rolls around. 2.53 ERA, 20.9% strikeout rate, 7.9 walk rate, 54.5 ground ball rate, and in 48 starts. But I think the transformation goes a little bit beyond the numbers. Like I mentioned, go back and listen to the Jim Allen episode. He does mention he rebuilt his entire repertoire. His cutter velocity was up 3 miles per hour. That's hard to do. He had a sinker that generates a lot of soft contact, enhanced the slider into a firmer sweeper. He mixed in a curveball and improved the feel for the changeup that he was like, he couldn't throw in the major leagues for a strike. So this is not the same pitcher that we saw in sporadic work from 19 to 23, where he 5.59 ERA. Of course, he's from the Blue Jays, the Cubs, and then your New York Mets. They're paying for the pitcher that he will become. And like I said, I think he'll probably be flipped at the deadline. They'll get some more prospects, but this is a way back in, and he deserves getting a chance here because those numbers to me stick out. You mentioned it in the Jim Allen episode for sure, that he's a guy who was like, okay, let's see what he can bring to the table.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems after Ponce signed, it seemed like he was next up, and sure enough, he was. Like less than 24 hours later, I was a little disappointed. It ends with him signing with the White Sox. I kind of feel like if he waited longer, I mean, don't get me wrong, like he and his agent clearly had a strategy here, but in my look at it, I was like, if this guy waited longer and other pitchers came off the board, I think a better team might have come calling. With that being said, he might look at it as this is actually a good kind of showcase for me because on this team, I'm going to be pitching every 5th day, no doubt. Whereas if I join a more loaded team, maybe I'm fighting for a spot. He should be front and center there, not necessarily saying he's the top of the rotation, but at the very least in the middle there, if things are going well. And so maybe this is seen as more of a showcase. And like you said, similar to Eric Fetty when he came back over here, ended up with the White Sox and then ended up being traded. The White Sox may be signing this guy to hope that that's what happens here. Not as a long, I mean, clearly still in their rebuild. Hopefully things continue to get better and go on the up and up. It's been a slow incline, but I do think it's on an incline right now. But yeah, I don't think they see him as a big part of the future. I think they see him as maybe he can be a trade chip and we can add to the youth pool. With that being said, I mean, good for him. He led the NPB in ground ball percentage, 57%. Jim Allen, also our guest from last episode, said, listen, he absolutely is like the poster boy for someone who benefited from the dead ball that they use in Japan. I mean, if you are not familiar, go look at the NPB ERA leaderboard and you'll see a staggering amount of ERAs below 2.5. And like a 3.5 is considered a really bad ERA with that history. Listen to the episode with Jim Allen. He goes on to talk about the history of the dead ball and why it happens and how people have fought against it and all this stuff. It's really interesting. I learned a lot, to be honest. But so that would be my worry for K, is that he comes over and he isn't that much of a different pitcher and he really benefited from NPB. But you're right, he did reinvent himself a little bit. So I'm hoping you see a big improvement from last time he was around the majors. And it's a cheap risk, pretty cheap risk for the White Sox. He pitches well, could flip him. So we'll see. But it's cool to see guys kind of go over to Japan, reinvent themselves a little bit, make sure they're out there every 5th day. Whereas when they're here and they're struggling, maybe they don't get that opportunity. And then showcase themselves. I mean, he was fantastic this year. So we'll see. We'll see what he does in Chicago.
So heading over to the KBO, we had Cody Ponce, as you mentioned, shortly after the sign of Anthony Kay. He signed a deal, 3 years, $30 million with the Toronto Blue Jays. And this deal, as I mentioned, is a record for a returning KBO pitcher. Fetty, as we mentioned before, the 2-year, $15 million contract with the White Sox was the previous record. So he goes on to double it here. And these numbers are staggering for the KBO. 17-1 record in career last year, 1.89 ERA, 252 strikeouts versus 41 walks, 180 and 2/3 innings pitched, and then a KBO Most Valuable Player award to sit on his mantle. And we talk about reinventing himself. He transformed himself from a fringe MLB arm into this power strike thrower with a lot of velocity, a devastating changeup, and his arsenal now is a fastball that sits at 95. He touches 98 when he wants to. He has that low spin kick changeup that we looked at. I mean, it's modeled after the Kevin Gausman, Trey Savage splitter, which is just nasty, and a lot of improved strength and command. So Toronto clearly looked at this and said, we have to be able to continue our run, find a way to secure our pitching staff. And this might be the deepest rotation in baseball if you want to take a look at all of this. And GM Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, who's the president over there, they have long included aggressive Asian scouting. They've been over there looking at him, and they were a top target on Ponce immediately above everybody. And not that everybody wasn't, because those numbers are just staggering. How do you not look at Cody Ponce and say, we want him on in our rotation? But you got Dylan Cease, Kevin Gausman, Trey Savage, Shane Bieber, Jose Barrios, which I feel like Barrios is kind of the odd man out here. Maybe he's going to be a guy dealt. This pushes their luxury tax past $270 million. There's no budget concerns in Toronto. The Blue Jays certainly are going to be adding more. I mean, they either could use a 6-man rotation. They could manage workloads. For Cease, as we mentioned, maybe he was hurt in these other years past where he was going out there and starting every 5th day, even through injuries. Maybe they say, we'll give him a little bit of innings limit and do what the Dodgers did. Like, just be ready for October. I don't want to take anything for granted, but make sure these guys are healthy when it matters. And for Ponce, I mean, this is a guy that obviously both these guys, the two different paths they took to get here, they leave Major League Baseball struggling. They reinvent themselves overseas. And I think this is what you want to see. This is kind of a work ethic thing where these guys over there and don't take no for an answer, and to come back at 3 years, $30 million. Shout out to them, man. I'm excited to see both these guys come into the major leagues and do it. And he's going to do it on a big stage in Toronto. This is a destination. People want to be watching baseball on a nightly basis over there.
Yeah. I mean, this is a fun story for sure. I mean, the Toronto I alluded to it before, but Toronto seems to be following last year's Dodgers playbook of just building an incredibly deep pitching staff And that will give them the luxury, like I said before, of like not rushing guys back when they do have a little bit of a nagging injury. I mean, we talked when Cease signed of like, who knows if the poor ERA and some of the poor statistics last year were because he pitches through little injuries. Like he is super durable, right? He gives lots of starts. He doesn't necessarily go deep into games very much, but he's out there every fifth day, gives you lots of starts every year. So maybe he pitches through it. And in a rotation like this, you can rest these guys and send them to the IL and tell them, like, don't worry about it. So I think it's interesting to see how Toronto's going about it. I still think they have an offensive move in them too, whether that be bringing Bo back or trying to get Kyle Tucker in here. I think they're, like I said before, out for blood. I would not be shocked at all. I would not be shocked at all if they still re-sign Max Scherzer and or Chris Bassett. Probably not both of them, but it would not shock me at all to bring Scherzer back. If you've seen Scherzer do some interviews, I know a lot of people want to connect him to San Francisco, his old coach from college, Tony Vitello, there now, right? I think he's back in Toronto, even with these 6 guys already there. When he talks about the Blue Jays, he talks about unfinished business, wanting everybody back, and uses the word throughout these interviews, almost as if he's already re-signed there. I think Scherzer's going to be back in Toronto, and at his age too, like a good situation for him where, he can be out a couple months and then come back and give some starts and then be out another few weeks and come back and give a few starts. I think he's back. But all right, to go to Ponce here, you mentioned most of it. He also set a KBO record with an 18 strikeout game at some point in that season. The kick change, you said, go find a highlight of this dude's kick change. This thing falls off the table. It's an incredible looking pitch. And then the velocity you kind of alluded to. Last time he was in MLB, he was topping out around 93. He's around 97 most fastballs now. That's a significant upgrade. He can throw it hard, added some muscle, looks like a big dude out there, intimidating presence. The critics would say there's a couple things they can point to. The KBO, a lot of people would tell you, is basically on par with AA, AAA, somewhere in there. That's what the critics would say. Okay. Also, you mentioned Eric Fetty, the last guy to kind of have success in the KBO and come back to the big leagues. He's been just okay, if even that, since coming back. So, all right. Now, he wasn't Fetty. I don't think was as dominant as Ponce was, but you could point to that. This one worries me a little bit. They could also point to Ponce's 3 seasons in NPB. I'm not seeing many people talk about this. He didn't go straight from MLB to KBO. He had 3 seasons in between in NPB, and he wasn't good. He pitched to a 4.54 ERA over the course of those 3 years in a very pitcher-friendly dead ball league. That's concerning a little bit. I know this one great season is so great, it's going to make a lot of people turn the other way. But I'm sure he was reinventing himself over the course of those 3 seasons too. Maybe some things didn't click, but that would worry me a little bit. But in the end, Toronto does not need him to be an ace, does not need him to be a number 2 or even a number 3. It provides them a future rotation piece if things go well for him, which is a little protection, as well as Cease being a little or a lot of protection for Kevin Gossman, who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, Shane Bieber, who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. And I believe Jose Barrios even has maybe a mutual option, or there's an option somewhere there
An
for
opt out after this
2027.
season. Yeah.
Okay. So again, a little protection here if Ponce is the guy you think he is, or even like close to the guy you think he is. There's no MLB scout right now that thinks Cody Ponce is 17-1, 1.89 ERA in MLB like he was in KBO. But I think if he can be serviceable, they'd be very, very happy. So I think it's fun. Go look at some highlights of this guy throwing the KBO. I mean, it looks like some really good stuff. Fantastic movement on that changeup. And I think it's a solid landing spot for a guy like Ponce. I know a lot of other teams were interested in his services. So I think it's a big signing.
So Armand is amazing back in the chat. He says rumors came out today that the Jays could trade Jose Barrios if he has a player opt out after the season, as we just mentioned. He also said Robert Murray, a FanSided report tonight that Tucker visited the Blue Jays facility. That's when MLB trade rumors that there's a whole article over here really just talking about him probably kicking the tires elsewhere. I think it's important to, mark that the Blue Jays are being very, very aggressive. It's really awesome to see. And, I think one of those things is that once you're in, and I think once you get a taste of success, I think that's kind of contagious at this point where you already blew past the luxury tax threshold. You're like, well, we're already in, we might as well go all the way in. But let's head over here to the winter meetings. And we mentioned it's coming up next week where Major League Baseball, this is usually where all the eyes are on what's going to happen. Free agency, it usually a lot of buzz come over here. Front offices, agents, major league officials are all concentrated in this one area for a stretch of the offseason. And this can take place at the Swan and Dolphin Resort in Orlando, Florida. And Monday through Thursday. So this kicks off the 8th and ends on Thursday, the 11th. And the general schedule here is they're going to arrive. They get the early groundwork for trades and free agent conversations. Things start to kick up on Tuesday where you get the trades going. Maybe there's a clearer sense of some asking prices. Wednesday is often the busiest day by the metrics of when people sign, multiple deals come together. And then Thursday, you got the Rule 5 draft, the final transaction, and some departures. So the winter meetings do matter. These are a big piece that 4 days people look into whether or not things happen for your team. They're out there kicking it around and figuring out what to do. And this year, I believe, and a lot of the metrics and conversations talk about several clubs with deep farm systems, the Mariners, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Reds, the Brewers, the Tigers, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, Knicks, Phillies in here, the Guardians. They're positioned to use some of this prospect depth to address their immediate roster holes. And I think for a lot of this, Devin, I think for the first time ever, I think we might see maybe more trades than we've ever seen in this capacity. I think a lot of trades and transactions in that way. Once people sit down, have a few drinks, maybe eat dinner together, walking around, figuring it out, you might have Seattle being able to move some of these 8 top 100 prospects and multiple infielders to maybe headline a deal. The Mets with the urgency on their end, chasing that frontline pitching that you are so desperately in need of. The Dodgers, I mean, we know they have one of the strongest systems in baseball and no rest for the weary. They have more prospects than big league openings, so they're going to try to better their team in the immediate, trying to get another World Series title. And then you have like the wild cards here with Milwaukee, Detroit, Boston, looming, Cincinnati. They each have some prospect surplus that and positional log jams. I mean, we talk about trying to fit all these guys on the field. I think that could really drive some of this conversation. I think many contenders need rotation help. Several of these guys are out there, cost control position players. Multiple teams are trying to reshape with these competitive windows, and it's more fascinating than ever. And I think part of this segment here, you and I are going to be talking about predicting a trade that could happen, putting our money on the table and saying, I think this trade will happen throughout this stretch of time that everybody's in the same room together. We know that some of the names, I mean, we've heard them. They were the same names that potentially are going to be moved in July. They weren't because the asking price was still high. Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, Joe Ryan, Mitch Keller, as we discussed here in the chat, potentially trying to draw interest over like a Bryce Eldridge. But you also have some outfielders out there. We mentioned the Guardian. Steven Kwanzaa is kind of looming around. Byron Buxton, Ketel Marte, Luis Robert Jr. And then we also talk about the teams with crowded outfields. Boston, Baltimore, Seattle. These guys are natural fits to match with some pitching needy clubs to be like, all right, well, we have to figure out a way to make this work, because as we mentioned, you can't start all these players if they're maturing and they're outclassing AAA. They got to get on the field. So I think it's going to make for a really fascinating couple days in Orlando.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, I don't think it's just because we hope there's lots of action because it's more fun to, you know, as a baseball fan, as someone who does a podcast to cover. I think legitimately there is, where there's smoke, there's fire here. We've already seen trades and trade talk for whatever reason that I think teams are going to exhaust the trade market and trade possibilities before they really kind of dip their toes in some of these bigger free agents. So I think those, you know, the Kyle Schwarbers of the world, the Pete Alonsos, the Alex Bregmans on the pitching side, the Framber Valdez, those guys, we might be waiting a little longer than we think for some of those signings to go down, because I think these teams are going to see what they can do on the trade market first. And you mentioned them, there are some like really enticing trade possibilities out there, whether it's Joe Ryan or Sandy Alcantara. I mean, the big fish. I know this story has kind of gotten stomped down for a few weeks now. Listen, the Tigers are going to have to listen at the winter meetings to people's best offers for Tarek Skubal, right? If you don't have any traction on re-signing Tarek Skubal right now as we stand, which by all reports they don't, then look to see what people are willing to offer. And listen, if the offers you don't think, if the juice is not worth the squeeze, all right, then that's not the route you're going to go right now. You can have kind of a situation in your head of like, this is what we would need, right? Maybe it's 2 established major leaguers, a top 50 prospect, and something else. I don't know. But they're going to have something that will have to be met. Someone blow them out of the water. And that's where I'm going with my predicted trade. Do you want to go to the predicted trades right now, or do you want to?
Yeah, go. You're right. You going Tarek Skubal?
Right. So I'm swinging big here. All right, and this has come up in my head a few times. I've probably mentioned it on the podcast a couple times, and I know there's definitely a sticking point. And yes, there are lots of holes you could poke in this, and I'll poke them myself when I go through this. But I'm going to predict Tarek Skubal in a major, shocking blockbuster of a trade, one of the biggest we've seen in years, is going to be traded to the Seattle Mariners. Wow. Okay, and now here is part of my reason. All this talk with the Blue Jays signing people and looking like they are just going for it, most of the talk is, man, the Yankees need to do something. They're watching the teams in their division make moves. The Yankees need to do something. Let me remind you, the Seattle Mariners were this close to being the ones taking on the Dodgers in the World Series. Their fan base is all in, as electrified as they've ever been, ready for the season to start right now. Okay? This is the time for them to continue swinging big, because I'm not going to sit here and say they haven't. They have already swung big. They swung big at the trade deadline. They re-signed Josh Naylor like everyone wanted them to. But this would be just a monumental, franchise-changing move. Okay, and this was my prediction. I mean, predicting the package for Skubal is nearly impossible. And I'll get to that. We'll get to why in a minute. But the prediction is Skubal goes to Seattle. And in return, it's going to be expensive. It's going to hurt. Logan Gilbert will go back to Detroit. Luis Castillo will go back to Detroit. And I think that one would be welcomed by Seattle, not because he's bad. I mean, he's been really good for them, but because he's got a lot of money left in the contract. If you're going to take Skubal and hope that you have enough money to re-sign him, you got to move some money off the table too. So Luis Castillo, and on Detroit's side, he could still be a solid starter for a team that has been in the playoff mix for 2 years. So it's not a bad thing for them. And then Cade Anderson, who was chosen, number 3 overall in the first round. Maybe the most MLB-ready pitcher that was drafted high in the draft this year. So what the Tigers end up getting there, I mean, Tiger fans might hear that and be like, no. We need more than that. Like, yeah, those guys are fine, but we absolutely need more of that. Like, throw in a bunch of other top 100 prospects. Here's the problem with that. This is a dude that has 1 year left on his contract. And if you listen to any expert, they will tell you he is absolutely not going to do what Garrett Crochet did when he was traded to Boston, and he negotiated an extension with them pretty quickly. By all accounts, Tarek Skubal, with Scott Boras as his agent, is going to go to free agency. So it is extremely risky to make a trade for him, not knowing if you're getting more than 1 year. I think it makes sense for Seattle because you were just so close to the World Series. So hopefully it doesn't end up just being 1 year, but if it does and it gets you there, maybe it's worth it. Okay. Now we've seen issues with this with, Juan Soto was traded to the Yanks, left after 1 year. Kyle Tucker traded to the Cubs for a pretty hefty package. Most people think he's going to be gone from Chicago as well. That's the risk you take here. I mean, that package is expensive in my opinion. Gilbert, Castillo, and Cade Anderson. I understand Tiger fans maybe thinking they need more, but Seattle's not guaranteed anything more than a year. That is the sticking point here and why I think a package is so difficult to come by. Gilbert, another year of arbitration. There's been some rumors about maybe Seattle, as of now, negotiating an extension before next season starts. The numbers I've seen are like 5 years, anywhere between 110, 125 million. I think it's probably closer to the 125 myself. So if you're Detroit and wondering how expensive he's going to be, and maybe we should just sign Skubal. Listen, Gilbert will be expensive, but not nearly as expensive as the rumors of what Tarek Skubal might be given. Okay, so I think that's a good spot for Detroit to get a guy like Gilbert over there, and extend him, but for less than you would have to pay Skubal. I already talked about Castillo. He takes money off of Seattle's hands. He has 2 to 3 more years at $24 million a year. The third year will depend on a vesting option. I believe the vesting option is if he pitches 180 innings or more in 2027, the vesting option goes into effect for 2028. Cade Anderson gives Detroit the cheap and controllable young arm, high upside. I think it makes sense on both sides. obviously, I already poked some holes in my own argument, but I just, what a move by Seattle if they could pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, I have my deal seems so lesser than I do have a deal for Seattle. We have Armand is amazing again in the chat. He talks about Skubal and Boris going to free agency, as we mentioned before. He's not going to cost much. Just look at Corbin Burns' trade to the O's. It's correct. Like, you're paying for the control for that year, and for the Tigers, we know that all the leverage is not in their court because most teams know when you come to the negotiations table that, well, we know he's probably walking and you're not re-signing him, so you want to get something from him. He also poses Kirby being more likely to be traded than Gilbert. What do you think about Kirby going back in that deal? If you're the Tigers, you like Kirby better than Gilbert, or?
No, I mean, if I'm Detroit, I'm asking for Gilbert. Now, in the negotiation, does Seattle try to say we don't want to trade Gilbert? We'd rather give you Bryce Miller or George Kirby? Yeah, I could see that for sure. I think the dream for Seattle is Skubal and Brian Wu as your 1-2. Like, how scary is that? Especially in a playoff series. And, not to mention Skubal played college ball in Seattle too, so there is a connection there. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense for Seattle to be like, not Gilbert, we'll give you Kirby. But I mean, I personally like Gilbert better long term.
Yeah, and for me, I definitely went the route for the Seattle Mariners adding, and I have them trading for Ketel Marte. And I think, look at what their roster construction is. It might not be as flashy as a Tarek Skubal pick, but I feel like acquiring Ketel Marte makes them the better team. And the package I have them getting back is it's going to take a decent price. Cole Young, I have going back, Michael Arroyo, and maybe a right-handed pitching prospect. I think this deal does check every single box for the Mariners. And I think for them, I mean, look at them straight up finish of the job mode. You mentioned before, this team was 1 win from the World Series, very close. Their pitching, as we know, is already good. Their bullpen is elite. Their core, as we mentioned before, when they re-signed Naylor, Julio, Cal Riley, they're entering a peak here. And the one thing they've lacked is another true middle of the order bat who lengthens the lineup. And I think Ketel Marte brings that in spades. He's a switch hitter. He's a contact first, low chase, high impact bat. He fits the profile of everyone that's in that lineup. And he's a second baseman, which is, I believe, Seattle's biggest positional need. A postseason proven hitter. We've seen him have that run to the World Series. And he signed to one of the best contracts in baseball. He's under control until 2030. So it kind of fits the narrative like, yeah, we have a guy and the answer is there instead of going year to year or trying to dig into free agency. That deal for Ketel Marte is aging better every year. And I think you could slot him right into the number 2 spot before Julio, and Raleigh immediately gives them really maybe the best top 3 in the AL outside maybe the Yankees, if you kind of look at the lineups as they're constructed. And we know Seattle can afford the prospect cost, which is, I think, probably why you and I went the route of them adding and subtracting prospects, because they're loaded with middle infield prospects. They can trade blue chip shortstops like a Cole Young. They can trade Michael Arroyo because there is a logjam. As we mentioned, these teams, like, yes, they are great players that you're hoping will be as good as advertised, but if there is a logjam blocking them from getting on the field, that's all they are at this point. And then you trade away those players, they still have Colt Emerson. They still have Felon and Celestin. They have Ty Pete. They have several others that can go down the list of other players. They're dealing from a surplus, and that's exactly what makes them win now. Like, they have to dig into their treasure trove of what they have to add to this team. And then from the Arizona perspective, because don't forget, like, this is a franchise that isn't too far away from where they were. They're not rebuilding. I think fans don't like to hear the word retooling, but they need to get a long-term pitching pipeline in place. They need a controllable middle infield. They need salary flexibility. They need replenishment after several high-profile trades that didn't work out. And I think trading Marte gives them a polished MLB-ready infield fixture, which will be Cole Young. Michael Arroyo could slot in as a high-upside second baseman. You get a pitching prospect. And then for Arizona, and again, you don't want to have to think this way, but you get financial breathing room. I understand it is a deal that makes sense, but it's a win now deal that I don't know if we're looking at the metrics and the trajectory for the Arizona Diamondbacks. They already have enough bats, in my opinion. Carroll, they need infield depth. I think pitching depth. They need more than one star contract. I think they have to find a way to sell. And I think selling Ketel Marte is at a high right now. He's healthy. He was productive. He was on a great contract, and he's coming off, obviously big moments that we saw him bring to the table. His value will never be higher. So why not pull the trade? And I think this trade actually does have some legs, because most of the other proposals that kind of go through are fantasy. And I think both of ours have some potentiality, because you look at the relationship between these front office, I think they have some pipeline here, and they're going to finish what they started as far as Seattle goes. They want to be able to get to the table and say, we want to improve this team. And I think there's actually good traction between both franchises already.
Yeah, well, the traction, like you are alluding to here, is they
Suarez, Naylor,
they made 2 deals before the trade deadline, 2 separate deals. Those guys, Naylor and Suarez, were not in the same deal, so they have exchanged players for prospects twice. So seemingly have a good rapport there. Marte to Seattle, I mean, I like the fit. I think a lot of people will be interested in Ketel Marte if he really is on the trade block here. I still have a little skeptical of whether Arizona truly wants to move him there. There was those weird reports last year that he's actually a little bit of a, I don't want to say character concern, but the clubhouse was a little annoyed at him not being at certain games. He had a lot of issues going on last year too. House being robbed, stuff with his mom and people saying terrible things about it. And there was a lot going on there. It's seemingly emotional where, like, on the outside looking in, it seemed like he had a lot of good reasons to maybe be missing certain times. But I don't know, that was a strange story. And maybe that has nothing to do with the rumors about him possibly being dealt, but I think there will be no shortage of suitors for his services. On Seattle's side, the concerning thing for him, I saw one report today about how, the Seattle success, great, but also some of their players that are going to go through arbitration, their salaries are going to go up. And then people worry about, are they going to actually try to cut costs again? And then that'd be super disappointing. I really don't think so. But like bringing a guy like Marte in, it's tricky because on one hand, the salary is, like you said, like a really good deal for what he brings. I mean, he's a top 10 offensive player at times. Like if you look at the last couple seasons, and I think it's legitimate too. He's on the books though for a while. So you have him in 2026, 2027, 2028, 29, 30, and then a player option for 31, where he would be upper 30s at that point as far as age. Now the player option is interesting. The whole contract is interesting. So he made $14 million last year. He's going to make $16 million in 2026, $12 million in 2027, $20 million in 2028, $22 million in 29, $22 million in 2030, and then the player option would be for $11.5 million. But again, he'd be an older player at that point. So before someone trades for Ketel Marte, the AAV, especially in a few of those years, is a nice deal. But are you cool with the years that you have this guy for? I mean, I could see him aging pretty well. He played in Seattle already, didn't he? Was he right?
I'll
look it up.
I don't believe he has, but the thing is, what you're gonna say with the years with Seattle, I think like they don't give a shit about 5 years from now. They want to win this year.
They should. I agree.
I just think they will look at the window and say, like, similar to what we're talking about with Edwin Díaz, and on a lesser extent, like Stevie Cohen, not caring about what the Mets spend in the immediate. They just want
that casino money, baby.
They want to win right now, and I think there's a contagious nature to what was happening in the Pacific Northwest last year. And same thing with Toronto. I think once you get a taste of that, you want to make sure you're back in there. And Marte was in Seattle. I mean, we have Armin.
Yeah, his first 2 years. So as a 21 and 22-year-old, he played 2015, 2016 in Seattle.
So and then the traction between Seattle and Arizona continues. I mean,
there you go. Yeah, there's a tie.
So, I mean, a lot of those conversations for Marte, I think, as you mentioned before, the stuff we saw last year, I think last year for the Diamondbacks, I think it's kind of been a theme throughout this whole podcast is about things didn't go right for the Arizona Diamondbacks last year. There's a lot that went wrong in that clubhouse and had to do a lot with the lack of winning. And there's a lot of injuries.
Yeah, they got killed with injuries. I still like how management has gone about the last few years. They've been aggressive at the right times, but they've also, last year they realized they did the right thing. They realized the season wasn't going in the direction they wanted, and they made some deals for future pieces. The bullpen was absolutely horrendous, especially after a few injuries. You have a guy like Zach Gallen have a down year and a walk year. You trade Merrill Kelly. There's been rumors about maybe them re-signing Merrill Kelly back to Arizona. I've seen that kind of tie too. But by all means, like when you see them talk in the media, they make it sound like they still want to be aggressive. But there's different kinds of aggression, right? It doesn't always mean like we're going to go out and sign 10 guys for high prices. Sometimes the aggression is trading a guy at his peak to kind of set yourself up for the future. And that might be the smart thing for them to do right now. Maybe not blow it up completely, mean, you got a guy like Corbin Carroll there. That's the guy you're building around at this point.
So as we kind of wrap up this episode here, we had a big segment discussing Sonny Gray hating the Yankees. I feel like it's been overdone as far as conversation goes, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about it at least. I mean, he got out there and said, quote, "It feels good to go to a place where it's easy to hate the Yankees." And he continued by saying, "I never wanted to go there in the first place," which to me, I mean, John Boy's been posting all the clips of it. It's a wild contrast to what he said on the day he was traded back in there and talk about embracing expectations, being ready, and he was miserable there. And I think this is kind of serendipitous that he continues to come up. He was traded after we discussed him on the Saris podcast, talking about not fitting in New York. Because I think when you think of a guy not going well in New York, the most recent example of it, I mean, maybe you can think of Devin Williams with the Yankees, but Sonny Gray comes to mind. Always. I mean, 4.90 ERA, battles over pitch usage, the nonstop scrutiny from the media. The relationship was fractured from the beginning. What are your thoughts on him saying that he hates? Is he just trying to endear himself to the Red Sox fans? Is that part of what he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look back at some of this old stuff, he seems to have a history of just immediately saying, I guess, the right things, what the fans want to hear. I mean, this time he wears the 2007 Red Sox World Series hat to really rub it in. Is super cocky the entire interview. I mean, the line that got everyone's attention was the one about being glad that he's playing for a team where everybody hates the Yankees. But like, listen to that whole interview. This dude is just like building himself up, like touting himself big. I didn't see him previously. I did not picture him and see him as that like cocky of a dude. This guy was, I mean, all about himself. But if you're asking me as an outsider, right? I'm not a Yankee fan, not a Red Sox fan. I love it. I absolutely love it as a baseball fan. Like, give me more of this, like being honest and open, even if he's not completely honest. Like, clearly, like you said, like some of the history of going back and watching interview clips or the stuff he wrote, I think, in the Players Tribune about coming over to the Yankees and things like that. It seems like he just says things to endear himself, like you said, to the fan base at the time. Now he's acting like he hated the idea of going to the Yankees all the time. I think that's a little disingenuous on his part. But as a fan that wants to be entertained, I love it. I mean, you got Cam Schlittler lighting Boston up from, his own hometown and then taking them down and talking shit and continuing to talk shit through the offseason, through social media and liking certain things. I even think he liked something that was bashing Sonny Gray like a day after the Sonny Gray interview. So Schlittler is already out there all over social media still. And now you got Sonny Gray saying this. I mean, let's bring that rivalry back, man. Keep on doing stuff like this. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, you trash the Yankees on day one. That's going to endear you and make them love you forever on that. But this is also paired with like months ago, Aroldis Chapman came out and said he'd retire on the spot before returning to the Yankees. That didn't feel like a Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees thing. That felt like an Aroldis Chapman hates the Yankees thing.
Well, let me ask you this, and this has been a question that's out there. Between those kinds of comments from established veterans, whether you 100% believe it or not, and then seeing now what's almost become a trend with Juan Soto leaving the Yankees for the Mets, and you can have the whole argument about was that just money based or were some of the other things with the family and stuff actually legitimate? And now Devin Williams, after 1 year, also leaves for Crosstown. And there's, like you said, there's rumors about Cody Bellinger. Like that would be now. I think that'd be eye opening. Is there any, from a Yankees fan's standpoint, is there any concern of like, is there something in the franchise that is rubbing players the wrong way a little bit?
It's certainly possible. I mean, I think each situation's unique. The Sonny Gray thing sounded like it was Eric Kratz agreed with Saris about his pitch selection. They weren't allowing him to be his true best self. The Aroldis Chapman thing, the relationship ended poorly. He didn't pitch well in big spots. So each of these situations, the Juan Soto thing, he took more money. I think each situation is so individualized that it's hard to see it's an overlying thing. Because for every situation, we have guys that want to stay. I mean, Aaron Judge had a chance to leave. He stayed. Best player in baseball, or second, whatever you want to say. Best player in the American League as far as offense goes. He decided to stay. So it's not like the Yankees can't retain people. But to me, the right people are staying. The right people are leaving. Juan Soto just took more money. I think that's the outlier. But if Cody leaves, I don't think it's a Met Yankee thing. I think it's just about how each free agent fits the certain teams. And Steve Cohen's spending money. I don't think it's the Mets are putting a better, greener pasture out in front of these free agents. I think that Steve Cohen is legitimately trying to build a winner, and some of these players that played with the Yankees would fit the Mets. I don't think it has any sort of overlapping storyline that people want to make it.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's just the Mets thing. I think that's on top of the Sonny Gray, Chapman stuff, even like the Vladdy stuff. Like Vladdy has been pretty open about like the Yankees are a team I'd really, first of all, I really like beating them, and he does the Yankees lose thing that which really got under the skin of Yankee fans.
I'm still
and
upset by it.
even before, oh man, I laughed my ass off at that, dude. To be honest, I find the David Ortiz thing funny every single time, and it's just kind of the way he says it. It just gets me. I laugh every time. But yeah, even before that, those moments, Vladdy had been pretty open about like the Yankees are the one team I just would really not want to play for. So that's interesting. I guess when you're that big of a brand, it's mostly love or hate, and it's very little in between and wishy-washy. Like you're going to feel pretty strongly about the Yankees one way or another.
Yeah, and the Juan Soto thing, we talked about this just discussing, I think, with Keith Rad on here. I think there was an underestimate of how bad the Yankee fans were going to treat you. And I think maybe people didn't understand the vitriol that exists between two fan bases on opposite sides. I think when you're not here in New York, it doesn't exist elsewhere. I think people don't conceptualize it that way. But if Cody Bell, I don't think Cody Bellinger gets treated that way if he winds up in Queens. I honestly don't. I don't think he gets booed at all in the Bronx. I don't think he's going to be treated like Soto. I think the Soto thing was because of how it was presented, what they traded to get him, et cetera, et cetera. Devin Williams will be booed no matter where he is. You know what I mean? He was going to be booed regardless. He earned those boos in a great way. But yeah. Each situation is so unique to itself. You know what I mean? And it's a tough place to play, but I don't think it's this overarching thing that people want to make it.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, when you hear things that drastic, the truth usually lays somewhere in the middle. I feel like that's kind of, you can come back to that a lot of times.
So on our way out the door here, I want to make sure you guys know where to find us on Instagram and on Twitter at TableSettersPod. You can also find us on YouTube. If some people are on here, it seems like Armand is Amazing's on here on YouTube. Thank you for checking us out at Table Setters Baseball. Give a like, give a subscribe, whatever it is. And then also, if you give a 5-star review, it goes a very long way for other people to find us. We are continuing to give you guys baseball content through the offseason. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're going to be back talking more things about the winter meetings, maybe some trades to break down, all those things, because baseball really never sleeps over here.
Yeah, man. Like you said, the winter meeting's only going to pick things up. Can't wait to see if any of those deals do go down. And we mentioned a couple predictions, but there's a lot of other teams that are going to be in the fray there. Exciting times, man. This is fun. And like I said, maybe Steve and I will come back next week and add we'll add 5 rounds on top of the 15 that we did a few weeks ago in our free agent prediction draft, because there's some guys that were not mentioned. I mean, Tatsuya Imai is a big one. Like where's he going to go? So there's plenty of guys that we didn't end up drafting in that free agent prediction draft that I think could be interesting to kind of add to the fray there. And like we've said in the past, we do have some guests that more than likely will be on here at some point during the offseason. So stay tuned. We're always giving you an episode, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3 in a week.
But until that time, we'll be back and talk to you after a while. And as always, happy baseball.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been